Absolute favorites is Amy Dash. She's Audacy sports legal analyst. She helps us sift through all these things and explains it in like a human way that we can all understand. Amy, thanks so much for making time for us again. The second time this week we're talking with you. It's busy. Thanks for doing it.
Thanks for always turning to me. I really appreciate it, and I love the show. You guys are doing awesome.
Oh, thank you so much. All right, let's get right into it. So, Deshaun Watson, obviously the NFL, Roger Goodell, has decided to appeal the 6 games. You wrote something very interesting on Twitter and on your League of Justice website about why you think that Deshaun Watson and the NFLPA have no shot in federal court. Can you explain that to us?
Yeah, and I'll start by saying I think they feel that way, too. They know that. So I think any threats to take the league to federal court, even if they act on those, they really know that they have a huge shot at losing and a very slim to none chance at winning. So what I wrote was that a lot of people don't understand that in the past when we saw Tom Brady and Ezekiel Elliott go to court and challenge discipline, they were challenging the process itself. And the legal standard for overturning an arbitration, or at least one of the main ones, is fairness. And so you have to basically challenge something procedural and say that it was unfair. We saw with those other 2 cases, there were so many things along the way, without getting into too much detail, that were unfair. Here, what happened, which is really interesting, is that the night before the decision from the arbitrator was issued, the NFLPA sent out a statement actually praising the fairness of this new procedure, expressing its intent to not appeal and asking the NFL not appeal to show that the new process that they both agreed to recently is legitimate. And also talking about how many thousands of pages were reviewed, how impartial the arbitrator was. And so the fact that they put in writing how fair the new process is means to me that they know that they have really no legal grounds to try to overturn an arbitration decision, which is really impossible to do just to begin with, even on a fairness argument. So the fact that they don't have sufficient grounds says to me that they're going to lose. Another thing is a lot of people may not realize that they can't just go in and complain about the length of a suspension. Oh, well, we think that 1 year is unfair, but 6 games is fair. That type of a distinction is not something that the court's going to be willing to review, but they will review the underlying process. And we know that it's brand new, newly agreed to, so it's going to be very hard for them to go in and cry foul when they just reformed this process and helped pick the arbitrator and agreed to give the league final say in the event of an appeal.
Amy, I guess playing devil's advocate a little bit, couldn't they argue that the NFL's appeal is so unbelievably much more than what the arbitrator said? If the arbitrator says 6 games and they go to a year indefinite suspension and $10 million, that's arguably quadruple what the arbitrator asked for. So couldn't they say this is just way too wide a gulf between what the arbitrator said and what you're ruling? And I think that's what the NFLPA would probably be thinking right now.
Well, they can try, but there are 2 things. One is that the personal conduct policy does not put a cap. In fact, it gives wide discretion to give any type of an arbitrary punishment that the league wants. And again, they agreed that the NFL could have the final say on this. So I think that's not going to hold water. The second thing, though, is that the NFL, even if Roger Goodell or his designee decides to lengthen to a year or indefinitely, they have to base the increase in the suspension on the factual findings of the original arbitrator, Sue Robinson. And because she found so many, quote unquote, her words, egregious violations, including 4 instances of sexual assault, she said the NFL proved that and met their burden to prove it was more likely than not that 4 times he sexually assaulted women, that he put women in genuine danger of their safety and well-being, and he committed conduct detrimental to the integrity of the NFL. So that's 3 violations against 4 women, 12 violations. She really sets up a groundwork where a year doesn't seem unreasonable at all if that's the way that the final decision maker decides to increase the suspension too.
What about a settlement between the NFL and the NFLPA where they even, I'm not sure how it would work. I know there were settlement talks up to last week. Do you think it's possible at this point, Amy?
Oh, absolutely. And I think that either way, whether you have this designee of Roger Goodell decides something or there's a settlement behind closed doors, it's probably going to end up in the middle. Maybe it will go to a year. If it does, I just don't see enough motivation there for Watson's team to bring the case. And the NFLPA's lawyers have a legal obligation not to bring a case that really doesn't have legal merit. So I think like 8, 10, maybe 12 games, if the league wants to try to avoid any type of a federal court battle, though it's probably going to fail. And consider this, that even if there's an application for a stay or an injunction, which I think is highly, highly unlikely to be granted, that will just delay the process in a case where he's more likely than not going to lose. And then if it pushes his suspension into the following year, well, now he's making $46 million on his contract, and he stands to lose way more money missing games that year. So it would be in his best interest, even if it's a year, to come back. Now, here's the one reason why he might try to appeal, or the NFLPA will take on that fight for him, is if there's an indefinite component to it. So it's not just a year that he's back, but it's a year that's sort of open-ended, and he doesn't know whether he'll be reinstated. Then it might be worth fighting against that type of a suspension.
Amy Dash is Audacy Sports legal analyst, and she joins us here. We're trying to sift through not just Deshaun, Amy, but a couple different legal stories going on in our sports world today. And the other is Brittney Griner. Now, I'm not going to ask you to break down Russian law for us. We'll keep it to the U.S. But, unfortunately, Brittney was sentenced to 9 years in a Russian prison today. She was also fined 1 million rubles, which is about $16,000 or so. I mean, this is now at the diplomatic level, right, about whether or not there's going to be some kind of a prisoner swap. But as you're following this case as a legal analyst and expert, what are the things that stood out to you the most?
Well, there's a lot of talk about whether there's political strings being pulled behind the judge's back, so to speak, that the judicial arm is not independent. And possibly that's true, especially with the climate politically of what's going on with the war.
Right.
But I also do think that Russia has a history of tough sentencing for these types of drug-related offenses. So to give 9 years when up to 10 years is the sentencing guideline doesn't necessarily mean that they're trying to do that to get more leverage in the prisoner swap, if in fact that's something that happens. I think that, either way, she was going to get a tough sentence because, first of all, she admitted to what it was, and that's just the way that they handle those types of things over there. But I think a prisoner swap is likely. This is something that's happened with hundreds and hundreds of people. And interestingly enough, a lot of this stuff happens and it just doesn't get media attention because it's not about a high-profile person. But these things go on all the time. In fact, the idea of a prisoner swap actually originated from how Europeans way back in the day decided to handle warfare. So it is a European-style concept. So I think, Russia will be amenable to it, and it usually happens quietly with the State Department in more low-profile cases. But when that will actually happen, I think, is what everybody's concerned about, because there is still a war going on, because the tensions are still really high, and Russia's very isolated from the rest of the international community, so they don't have a lot left to lose that they haven't already lost. It really depends on how much they want the person on the other end, who's apparently a convicted arms dealer, how much they want that person back, whether they're asked for more people as part of the swap. But the big question for everybody is, how long will she have to serve in prison before she can get back over here? And I think that's the huge unknown. And how will she do under those conditions? So that I don't have an answer to, and I think that's the most critical point, is not will this happen, but when will it happen?
Amy, we only have 30 seconds left. Real quick, there's a headline in the Brian Flores discrimination case. A judge said that they won't be able to gather any more evidence in a hearing about whether it goes to arbitration or not. Do you have any sense of where this Brian Flores case is and where it might be headed in the immediate future?
Yeah, I saw that, and his attorneys issued a statement that they sent out internally, and it basically said that the judge is telling them they can try to prove or make the argument that there is bias there and unfairness if this goes into an arbitration, because obviously it's run by the league, right? So, but they don't need extra evidence to do that because it's pretty obvious. So I don't think it was a major ruling, but what is important is that there will be a decision soon on whether this is going to be forced into arbitration or whether it will be heard by a court. We just don't know that yet.
Amy, can't tell you how much we appreciate this. Audacy Sports legal analyst Amy Dash. Follow her on Twitter at Amy-TV. You always put this in terms we can understand.
Absolutely.
So thank you, Amy.
Oh, awesome. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you for watching our video. Please like, comment, and subscribe. And if you want to see more videos like this, just hit the bell.
Yeah, ring the bell.
Just hit the bell.